we have our next panel titled Make Money Moves: How Brands Can Reinvest in Their Business to Maximize ROI. Whether your goal is to retain your current customer base or to create a winning strategy that reaches new consumers, reinvesting in your business is an integral part of growing your revenue. Learn from our panelists as they share their tried and true methods of how and when to put your bucks back into your brand in order to scale.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session on how brands can reinvest in their businesses to maximize growth. I'm Diana Ransom, features editor at Inc., which is a top resource for news and useful information for today's fast-growing businesses and startups. I'm joined by an esteemed panel of business leaders I'm eager to introduce to you. First up is Savannah Sachs. She's the CEO of Tula, a clean skincare brand powered by probiotics and superfoods. And we have Heidi Zach, who's the co-founder and CEO of Third Love, a D2C undergarments and more recently Loungewear clothing company. Philippe, I'm terrible at this name, I'm sorry. Philippe Rorio, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Philippe. He's the Vice President of Business Development at Gorgeous, a company that offers e-commerce customer service tools. And last but not least, we have Ari Horowitz. He's the co-founder and CEO of Yardline Capital. It's a fintech startup that provides growth capital combined with business optimization tools for e-commerce sellers. Now, before we begin, I'd just like to announce that we'll try to leave some time toward the end for some viewer questions. So if you have those, please add them into the chat box or the Q&A box. Now, I'd like to kick things off with Heidi. Since today's topic is all about how to reinvest in your business to take things to the next level, I wonder if you can walk us through a decision that stands out in your mind that ended up proving transformative for the business, and explain how it all worked out.
Yeah, I think, hi, and great to be here. I should say hello and good morning or good afternoon. So yeah, I think for us, it's really been about making sure at every moment along the journey of Third Love over the past 8 years that we're reinvesting in the things that matter the most. And I think that we all, as founders and CEOs, there's a lot of different things coming our way, a lot of different initiatives, and it's really about picking the right one and the ones you can own. So the way I make that decision and how I think about that, and I can give 2 examples that come to mind. One is like, what makes you different from others in your space, and how are you going to set yourself apart? And then continue to reinvest in those things. So one example of this is our online tool for sizing. It started in the beginning as an app. It moved into something called the fitting room, or the fit finder. And of late in February, we relaunched this fitting tool as the fitting room. So we put a lot of resources, money, design time, our data science team behind this tool, because we've had 18 million women use this tool to find their size. And it's a huge differentiator, data and the data that we collect from others in the space. And so really doubling down on, those tools or categories that are really working, and investing in product, whether that's physical or digital, that allows us to set ourselves apart from our competitive set.
So Heidi, at what stage did you add that? Because you started in what, 2012, right?
We had it from the beginning, because here was the thing when we started Third Love and we said, how are we going to sell bras to women online? And I know this seems like a silly question today because a lot of people do it, but at the time that was the question we got from investors in 2013. Like, they didn't believe that women would take the leap of faith to buy such a personal, size difficult product online. And so we knew we had to solve what I call like the fit issue. Like, if I say, come buy a bra at Third Love, like, how do you feel confident that you're going to get a size that works? And so from the very beginning, we had fitting technology, and that changed over time. And as others entered the space and started doing things similar to us, we always want to be able to leapfrog that and be doing something even more innovative and good for the customer too.
And do you have an example of something that you did, I guess, midway through that sort of was a game changer?
Yeah, I mean, I would say this last version, it was really about how do we, because up until this point, up until February of this year, it was a fit finder, meaning size. And that's what we focused on. And then what we came to realize was, as we had all of these other categories we were entering into, many, many more SKUs. We used to have a few SKUs of bras, and now we have bras and underwear and sleep and lounge, like you mentioned, and all of these different styles, that style and color and fashion and preference, and then also really understand understanding how that ties back to what we recommend her became more and more important. So that was one of the biggest things that we launched with that, plus 3D virtual showcasing of fit issues, which we heard from our customers was difficult to understand. So we built something that was a little bit more easy for a customer to see, react to, and then answer the question on.
Yeah, that's actually really a really good thing to key in on, is the idea of hearing from your customers and then letting them kind of, tell you what they need. Savannah, I wonder if you can talk to us about, how I'm sure you're in touch with your customers. Like, was there an experience that you had at Tula that your customers that helped direct you in a way toward maybe a new product line or a new offering in general?
Yes, definitely. Well, a lot of similarity actually with Heidi, in a different category though. And I'm currently in Third Love, so love the brand. Um, and, I think echoing what Heidi said, really at the core of how you think about investing in your brand and business is, what are the core things that you need to differentiate on? And what are also the core capabilities you want to build internally in order to differentiate and remain competitive? So very much along the lines with Heidi, it's about, relevant brand, great product. And for us, with over 50% of our revenue direct to consumer, really investing the D2C channel and really seeing it as a capability. And so that's about building in-house teams. And so what that has allowed us to do is to develop and build a really close relationship with the customer that's incredibly data driven. So very similar to the Fit Finder, we have a skin quiz, and that's where customers can come to Tula.com, share their skin concerns, goals, skin type, and get a personalized routine. Now, I think what that does for us is not only provide a personalized customer experience that drives to higher revenue per visit, for example, for customers that engage with that skin quiz, but we're getting over 500,000 data points every single month from that quiz. And so, Diana, to your question, this has actually led to several light bulb moments that have informed our product development pipeline. So, for example, about a year and a half ago, we noticed that our average age of our customer on Tula.com is 32. So core millennial audience. And yet 48% of people that took the skin quiz were saying they struggle with occasional or regular breakouts. So there's this light bulb moment where acne is not a teenage problem. It is a skin concern that you manage throughout your life cycle. And there was white space to build an acne solution as a clean brand for the millennial customer. So we built out that franchise, and sure enough, the LTV of the acne customer tends to be about 40% higher because they have that targeted concern, and it's quite sticky category. So that's an example of how investing in the core capability of D2C data, that direct relationship in the customer, can really inform your product development pipeline.
So that's huge. What a great example. Ari, I wonder if you can weigh in here on what are some of the things that you've seen that businesses make mistakes on, like when they're looking to sort of bring things to the next level. What do they get wrong?
Well, I think you gotta break this into a couple categories. All the discussions so far have been about initiatives that improve the brand, and these are really strategic initiatives. A lot of what we focus on is more tactical. It's more around once you get the product right and really solve for all the things we've been discussing here, and have these cool hacks as to how to get people in more efficiently and keep them there and create customer value there. What we ultimately look at is, now how do you step on the gas, right? How do you drive the business aggressively? And specifically where we focus, which is purely in digital, there's an unlimited number of customers out there. To go to double or triple your business, ultimately, most of the time, it just requires more cash once you've figured out the basic business model. So what we look at is, and I think the biggest mistake people make is looking at net margins instead of net dollars. Right? So being able to take non-dilutive growth capital that we provide, look at what the cost of that is, and just factor that into your margins, and keep stepping on the gas until you get to something that you're comfortable with on the edge. I think that's to answer your question, the mistake people make is differentiating between the two. I think it's a little dangerous to put debt capital, which is what we ultimately offer. It's not equity. Against product development, things that you don't necessarily know a return for. but rather use our type of financing once you get the business model right, and then you just really step on the gas.
So a good question for maybe Philippe here is, how do you know when it's time to do the next thing?
Well, so a lot of the talk was around like product market fit. So far, it's like, how do you really understand your customers to get to product market fit as fast as possible? And what are the indications of product market fit? Like, when do you know, like in the DTC space, that you're hitting that inflection point? And it's really, I'm sure it has been talked about earlier today, but it's really about that CAC to LTV moment when you have enough data that tells you that you can acquire customers at a certain cost and they're going to stay enough with you. And that's when you go see Ari. You're like, I've got this metric ironed out. Like, we did all this analysis on the customers, and we know this is a product that they want, and they're going to come back. And we're hitting those key financials metrics that we need in order to scale. So how do we? And then after that, where do we inject, right? So how do we scale faster? But it's really that CAC to LTV moment that might take for entrepreneurs. We see anywhere between like 9 months to 2 years to figure out if they're going to hit it. And then from there, they hit that inflection point of like being at 500K of run rate to quickly being able to scale into like 8-figure territory.
Well,
Yeah, and I was going to say, jumping in on both Ari and Philippe's point, I think there's something pretty powerful in the way you think about marketing investment. So for us at Tula, we do not have a dollar marketing budget. I mean, of course we do in the P&L, but that's not what we talk about or manage to as a team. We have an ROI figure. So whether that's your CAC or for us, we do ROAS, you should know, what are we willing to pay for a customer, because we know our margin and payback and what we're shooting for in terms of overall sustainability of the business. And you acquire as many as customers as humanly possible at that rate. And you shouldn't be held back by the dollar marketing budget overall. It's really about that ROI metric. And so I think that's quite subtle, but it's incredibly powerful in terms of how we run our business, because it means you can lean in when there's opportunity and pull back when you need to optimize in order to re-hit that target. So I think that's been one of the most critical things about Tula's success and rapid growth and sustainable growth as well.
Right on. I could not agree more. I think that's so smart. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we see of people coming in looking for capital. We sometimes see companies coming in, maybe not DTC, but I'll call it different, an Amazon seller, not spending any money on PPC, which is kind of shocking when you think about it. And they just seem like they're leaving so much money on the table by doing that. And even Philippe, to your point, it's not even LTV. Sometimes it's just flat out margin. Like you could spend a few bucks, you're making money on the first sale, and whether or not
if you
they
hit
come back.
your margin on the first sale, that's even better.
Right? And we see customers all the time coming in that actually could be stepping on the gas and making margin on that first sale. They're not even thinking about LTV, right? That would be a profitable sale day one. And then you just got to look at that with the cost of the capital. And in our opinion, you should be doing that right up to the edge, right? Just figure out what you're comfortable with, a little margin for error, and step on the gas. And that's what's so amazing about these marketplace economies and DTC, but really more so the marketplace economies, is that the customers are there. If someone came to you and said, hey, I'm going to triple the size of my restaurant in the next month, you'd kind of look at them like they're kind of nuts. And say, I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm not going to give you the money to do that. But you come to us and say, I'm going to triple the size of my Amazon business in the next month. You say, okay, sure. That makes a lot of sense, because even if you 10x it, you're still probably not a material revenue there. And there's plenty more customers to get after. So I think that's the dynamic we see people got to get their heads around and start to think a little differently. And that's what's so exciting about non-dilutive growth capital, is you just keep turning it.
I mean,
sorry.
Can I ask Heidi to talk for a minute? So speaking as somebody who recently was in brick and mortar and then had to, leave it in March, do you think it's actually a wise idea to get back into it at this point, or if you're trying to be one step ahead of where the market is?
A great question. I mean, again, obviously, scaling brick and mortar versus scaling on Amazon is an incredibly different capital investment that you're making, and also a differentiated investment for, especially for someone who's in D2C and has their team and company built around how do we effectively and efficiently build a brand and sell product online. So it's definitely, there is no, I think, magic bullet answer here. That being said, I think the physical element of a brand showcasing your product in a store touch and feel environment with real people cannot be replicated online. There's no replication for an in-store experience for online brands, and that's why a lot of brands go into it. So again, it goes back to the metrics, right? And so what was interesting with our New York store is that the behavior, the conversion rate, the AOV, what people bought, the repeat rate, everything was radically different from our New York pop-up than it was online. Like, it didn't mimic it. And so for us, it's more about continuing to learn. So yeah, at some point we'll do another store, more so to really understand what do those metrics look like and what's the efficiency there with brick and mortar, and then what's the halo effect, right, to that local market in terms of online sales. So we still personally at Third Love have a lot to learn about that as a new channel. And so I kind of think about it as a new marketing channel, right? When you're testing and entering a new marketing channel, you're seeing like, how does this work for us? How do we optimize it? Should we invest? Should we build an internal team? Should we leverage an agency? And so, you know, as we're thinking about brick and mortar, it's like, do we really want to do that ourselves, or do we want to partner with somebody to do that? And so those are some of the questions we're answering, you know, here internally.
We've seen some incredible stats where with some of the Amazon clients that we have, the brick and mortar, where they have brick and mortar, they actually see a significant uplift in their Amazon sales in those geographies, which is really, really interesting to see. And I think that, you know, at least from our standpoint, especially the way we underwrite, because we're primarily underwriting, really exclusively underwriting on digital sales, because that's what we can predict, is that the channel it's really, I think about it as like, I'm not a brick and mortar going to online. I think it's now flipped, right? I'm a digital company, I'm selling online, and I have a brick and mortar channel that sort of supplements and assists and helps my online business. I think that's really the answer. And I totally agree, Heidi, with what you're saying. People still want to touch stuff. And
I'm sure, you know, having a billboard basically in Soho didn't hurt the business from a marketing perspective. So Savannah, I wonder if we can switch gears here and talk about, you know, sort of a little bit more of how we, you know, we're entering this recovery. And I was hoping you could weigh in on, you know, sort of a key challenge that you're seeing as we head into this, you know, post-pandemic world.
I think the challenge is there's a lot of demand, which good problems to have, you know? So, I mean, we feel very fortunate and well positioned. The last year has been an incredibly strong growth year for us. You know, again, sitting at the intersection of beauty and wellness with D2C as our largest channel. But actually, to the conversation just going on, we really see ourselves as an omni brand, and brick and mortar is an incredibly important part of the strategy, not only because the majority of sales in beauty and personal care are still offline, but to your point, you know, being in 1,200 Ulta stores is like having 1,200 out of home advertising moments where you're building that brand awareness. And so right now, as vaccinations are rolling out, things are reopening, the weather's getting better, you know, demand is well above expectations, particularly in brick and mortar. And, you know, we're certainly seeing some consumer behavior shifts. For example, SPF is now our #1 top seller. So clearly people are taking advantage of getting outdoors more. You know, I think in terms of challenges, for us, we've been really playing catch up on hiring. And I think that, you know, one of the most critical things you can invest in as a business is talent. You know, I think that for me, my leadership purpose is building a happy, high performing team to drive rapid growth. And so I think first and foremost, really investing in talent and culture is critically important. And so that's really our challenge, which again is a good problem to have. Playing catch up. You know, we've actually tripled the size of the team in the last year and done so entirely via Zoom. So it's a wild adventure to hire and onboard and really truly integrate top talent. But it's a great time to be in the market. I think that there's a lot of great talent out there that are looking to make a change and go to a fast growing business. So I think that's the top focus for us.
And Heidi, you expressed some reservations just sort of as we enter. This is in a prep call, I believe you mentioned just as we head into this recovery, a lot of people are going to look to jump ship, not necessarily from third love, but just generally speaking, people were sort of in their jobs during the pandemic, and maybe as the things start to improve, they might start looking around. I guess my question for you is, like, how do you keep top talent?
Yeah, I read this stat recently in an article that 21 out of 4 people who are employed are looking to change their job company in the next year, which is like a shockingly high statistic. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really about making sure your top performers, see a roadmap, understand where they're going, and that you're giving them more to take on. And so, what is interesting is that as people leave the company, it really gives you a chance to reassess how you're set up and who's doing what. And so, we have a wonderful person who actually was here in my office yesterday, who was leaving, who ran some of our social and PR. He's taking a few months off. We were able to give most of his responsibilities to another woman we recently hired, right, which allows her to grow into new areas. So I think it's really about making sure you're looking internally for those promotions, as well as externally, obviously, for places that you need to scale or you don't have that talent internally. But it's hard. I mean, that's a never ending, I think people, I'm sure Savannah would say yes to this, like, people and talent as a CEO of a company, you spend a lot of your time on that. It's not easy. There are no tried and true things. You're always trying to innovate with people and what you're doing, just as you are with your business.
And Philippe, correct me if I'm wrong. Your company as a customer service tool, I suspect that your company has been, very familiar with working remotely for some time. As we sort of sit around the table talking about, like, what's next, I wonder if we can talk for a minute about, sort of maintaining culture and what it means for transitioning back.
Yeah, that's so we're spending a lot of time here in the executive team talking about that exact topic. As we went, like, similar stories to the other people on this panel here, we went from about 20 employees 18 months ago to now over 150. So it's like, even like that culture expansion, it's like, how do you make sure that everybody that you add to the team, adds to the culture, not necessarily like gets completely sponged by it, but like they're bringing something to the table. And when it comes to very tactical things that we implement, like obviously the quarterly now mandatory retreat over 3 days with like different type of workshops, and where people get to hang out virtually together. It's a little bit sad, but it's something that we're doing. And then the promotion like cycles, like in order to remain very competitive in terms of and attractive to our internal talent and to external as well. Like, so the average person gets promoted like between 9 to 12 months internally now, like, and that follows the kind of like fast-paced growth. And how did they get to the promotion? That's the most important aspect of it. It's like those side projects that is not necessarily core to their daily task as an individual contributor or as like a mid-level manager. Is like, how do we enhance their daily task with something that can have a larger impact, and how do we showcase that impact internally and use that as a lever to get them to the next level. And we think that, like, yeah, by continuously pushing forward like this, and by giving like those adjunctory tasks, we help our employees grow, and we help our culture like be really involved.
Philippe, I love that you use the word add to the culture. I think that's critically important. We do not talk about culture fit at Tula. We talk about culture add, because I think when you're looking to build a diverse team, you really need to be quite intentional about that. And so I love that you use that language.
100%. You can't like maintain, like, it's not the same thing a 10 people company that it is 100, or even like 2 co-founders to 10. It's like it always morphs itself. It's just like, how are you intentional about that morphing and going forward in a certain direction? And as inclusivity, like, and as we're expanding also in new markets and things like this that have like those local cultural elements to them, like when we open a new office, let's say in France versus like in Australia or in Canada, it's completely different. And those markets also bring something that you can't just expect to be the culture fit that you have today.
Okay, so we have a jump ball question here. So outside of from a viewer, outside of social media advertising, what's been your best customer acquisition ROI? Heidi, did you catch the ball?
Yeah. I mean, I've two. I mean, one is not at scale, and I think one's more at scale. I mean, this is a difficult question to answer because I think there's a lot of channels that work really well when it's a small amount of money, and then as you try to scale them, they don't maintain that return. And so therein lies, like, the $1 million question. I would say at a scale question, I would say probably podcast for us. It was something we started in 2015, forever ago, and it's maintained its efficiency as we've scaled. And honestly, even some of the podcasts that we've been on since 2015, we're still on because they still perform, which is really, really interesting and kind of says something about how people are connected to the podcast they listen to. I think on a smaller basis, something that we've been investing more on are more kind of micro influencers. I think we're seeing a lot of success with that, but it's still really small. So the question is, how does that look as we continue to build out that program over time?
And Ari, I wonder if you can hit us home. What are 3 things that a smart business, or 3 or so things that a smart business person should be doing now to prep for growth?
I think we talked about a few of these. You got to get the product right. If you don't have the product market fit right, if you don't have a lot of these, the elements around the brand, you don't have anything, right? So if you don't get that, then you got to get your pricing structure right, especially relative to your competition, the whole supply chain, all the nuts and bolts of operating the business on top of a good product. And then I think the third move is you start to pour some lighter fluid on it. You pour you throw capital at it, and you just keep pressing it and try to maximize the net returns. I think in this environment, you don't worry about net margins. As I said, if you got a good gross margin on your product, you should be spending right up to the edge. The bigger you get, the lower your COGS are going to get. So you get the bump there, and your advertising can become less efficient over time, but people shouldn't worry about that. They should just make sure that it's continuing to be, whether it's LTV, if you want to invest, or you just want to get the direct return, just keep spending. This is a unique moment in time. This is a land grab, right? And as I'm speaking again to a lot of the marketplace economies because we play there a lot, but it's all about velocity. And once you get yourself positioned there, you just ride the tide. So those would be my recommendations.
And Savannah, I wonder if you can weigh in on that too.
I think, echo a lot of what has been said so far. I think that the one thing I would add is we've talked a lot about ROI and hard metrics so far. I do think as a consumer brand, you also need to think about ROE, return on brand equity. And so I think in a deeply personal and emotional space, building a brand, you can't measure everything. And so I think there needs to be a deep respect for that right brain, left brain thinking. It's one of our core values at Tula. And I think that there's ways to get a sense of if you're headed in the right direction. For example, doing a customer survey and asking them to describe your brand. Are you nailing your positioning? And that is really important to invest in and is a little bit harder to measure. It can't necessarily have ROAS on a daily, weekly basis on that front. So I think the one piece I would add into the conversation is, yes, focus on data analytics, metrics, return, but you also, if you're building a brand, really need to think about investing in the right ways there too, and know that you can't measure it in the same way.
And adding one more thing on top of here that deserves to be said, because we're talking about a lot of us are talking about product companies, is that you have to invest in product. If you're a product company, design and development, thinking forward, what does your customer want in 6 months to a year? Where are they going to be? How are you, the product lead times can be long depending on what category you're in. You need to spend time and money today to have that in 6 months or a year at the right moment. And definitely at Third Love, there's been times over the past years that I've not made the right decisions there, or we haven't invested, and then you're playing catch up, and that's not a fun position to be in. So certainly making sure you're thinking ahead and investing as well in your actual product is really, really important, as well as brand, to echo that.
So can you take us through the timeline of launching Loungewear? Like, did you just, look at the pandemic and go, obviously, or was this in the cards long ago?
It actually started before the pandemic slightly. And then we kind of actually put it on the back burner. And then that's something that I do slightly regret. It was more like, what's going on with inventory? The world is crashing. This is March of like 1 year ago, March, April, right? And so by the time we kind of got settled and then realized there was actually a lot of opportunity, as Ari was saying, right? Like all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's not so bad. Like this is actually, there's some really good things going on. Went back to it. And then it took us a while, it takes a while. And then you have your supply chain issues and you have all these other things going on that make it a little more hard. So yeah, I think again, just really being proactive about, as a business leader, you're always focusing on today and this week and this month, but you also at the same time need to be focusing on a year out and having that, that balance in what you're doing day to day. Yeah. So I wish I would have had Lounge 6 months before we had it in, January. So
what's
Yeah,
the next thing?
I was going to say, I can completely empathize. I mean, thinking back to March, April of last year, the scariest decision we made was to lean in on inventory. I think that as you think about investing, again, that biggest line item actually often in terms of use of cash is inventory. And those are the hardest and most important decisions you make. And having the guts, in the midst of lockdown to lean in and say, hey, we think there's going to be incredibly strong demand here. Let's go for it, was the scariest decision I've ever made and, paid off in the end. But I would say, again, we're speaking a little bit more in the consumer goods realm, but inventory is the easiest thing to mess up in both directions. Too much, too little, and too little will really hold back your growth. So I think that's another important thing. Make sure you have the team around you from a planning standpoint to get that right.
So presumably as we get into a recovery, when, consumption turns from products to services, what's the next step?
I mean, I can speak to that from a skincare standpoint. So, I think that what's very interesting is in past economic downturns, there's been the lipstick effect. This time it was the skincare effect, both because you're at home and also there's just more of a focus on health and wellness, right? And skincare is just going gangbusters. For us, we certainly are thinking about what is that shift in consumer investment, from more goods, which has been obviously the core of the last year, to more services as things open up. Having said that, as we think about the beauty category, good skin doesn't go out of fashion, right? There are cycles within color cosmetics where no makeup look versus a full face swing back and forth. But once you've established a skincare routine, it's a strong repeat category. And so we believe that there's a lasting customer behavior there. And we've basically just established the new floor for skincare. So I think that's a little bit more specific to beauty for folks that's more relevant to, but that's one of the ways we're thinking about the shift in consumer behavior and how can we really maintain that strong repeat rate we see for our customers as the key to success for any brand really is your repeat rate. So investing in that to make sure that you're maintaining that customer behavior.
I'd like to just comment on both those points. One of them is, for all terrific, that when you do make an investment, the one thing that we really believe strongly when you're talking about investing in new products or new brands, that should really be something you do with either your own equity or someone else's equity. I think people got to be really careful to take risk with the type of financing that Yardline provides or any type of debt financing, where ultimately you're going to have to pay it back at some point, because you can invent a new product or come with a new product, it ain't going to work. And you still got to, you're responsible for that money. So I think that is something that entrepreneurs really need to think about is whether they use debt or equity. From a standpoint of inventory, what Savannah was talking about, one of the things that we have done, which I think is very exciting for entrepreneurs, is we only get our capital back and our fees once the inventory sells. So we're aligned with our partners from that standpoint. We believe in these marketplaces. We believe in DTC, and when we underwrite, we look at and help make those forecasts. And there's capital out there, to my point, to be able to say, hey, we'll step on the gas. I mean, we're putting our money where our mouth is. I'm speaking here a lot about the land grab and the opportunity. And so we want to partner with people that want to be aggressive, grab that land and stock up aggressively on inventory, especially on these marketplaces. Stocking out is one of the worst things you can do. When you lose that velocity, it hurts you, not just because you're missing sales, but because you start to lose rank. So super important, I think, more so than anywhere, to bulk up And we try to, we are partners in that respect, and that we only get our capital back once that product sells.
And for the fear that people might stop purchasing online, and as they're going back to services, like Shopify is still forecasting 10% quarter on quarter growth in both their revenue and their GMV, like over the next year, post pandemic. During pandemic, it was closer to 15%. So they're still expecting to be growing 3x faster than pre-pandemic when the dust settles. So there's still tremendous opportunity ahead for brands that got their product market fit to just pour the gas on the fire and accelerate, and then also like expand, just like Savannah did into retail.
And what's the kind of gut check that you need to engage in as a business owner or as a startup founder when you're in such an uncertain climate? Like, how do you know when to do the next thing? Heidi?
Maybe that's really the skill of being a good or bad entrepreneur, and it's Darwinist, right? The ones that make that decision well are still here, and the ones that didn't aren't.
Or you come to this panel to learn some advice from.
Or you get educated and hope you're right, and that history repeats itself. So that's a tough one. I really think that's just the entrepreneurial instinct, and sometimes you make a bet and you're right, and you get lucky. Probably more so than not. I think all of us would be kidding ourselves if we didn't say we've made some bets and we've been lucky. But you also make the heads or tails bet, and it just comes up tails 3 times in a row, which is not the probability, but that does happen. So it's I really think it's a lot of luck and good intuition, and just trying to get to really the point. I think it was Savannah that said it. You just gotta get really good people around you also, and listen and take their advice from and try to make good decisions.
And Ari, just something that's been niggling at me as you've been talking is so debt, you were saying what you all provide isn't necessarily something you want for everything. When are you supposed to use debt capital?
Yeah, so we actually don't even call it debt in the traditional sense. We're not providing money that we expect to get paid back on a fixed period. We actually enter into a short-term relationship where it's actually a contract for future receivables, where we share essentially take a royalty on future revenues until we get our capital back plus a fee. So that way, if the business accelerates, we're all making money together. If the business decelerates, or Savannah's concern earlier, where there's, you get stuck on a lot of inventory, we're not hammering the company and hitting the cash flow that's not necessarily there. So first of all, I think this product helps solve that problem. Number one is that you don't have to be as smart or as good a predictor of the future. You just need to know that you have a good metrics for your business, and it's now a question of return. But I think that the real answer is, the way we look at it is, if there's going to be future revenues and there's going to be the ability to pay back through the royalty stream, then sure, we'll advance it. And that's when someone should take it. If it's going to go into, hey, I got this new idea for a product that may or may not work, and then there's no revenue attached to that afterwards, we'll still provide the capital because we'll do it on the core business. But then the core business is going to have to get that capital back, and you didn't get a bump from where you made that investment. So I think that the net answer is, you use the type of capital we provide when you have more certainty, at least, or the metrics are there, or you understand your business. When you're totally going for it and you're making a true entrepreneurial bet, that's when you should be using your own equity, hopefully, if you have equity in the business, or you go take on partners and take on equity capital that you don't necessarily have to pay back in any fixed period of time, but you reduce your upside. So
friends, family, and fools, right?
Let's hope not the latter.
There's a viewer question here. If you started a brand today with $25,000 to $30,000 in your budget, which channels would you invest in? Heidi? Sorry, I go to you a lot for some reason. I feel like this is perfect for you.
I mean, that's a real hard question to answer without knowing, what the brand is. And this, I mean, it's so dependent. And that's the other thing. Like, people ask me all the time, would you do it third love? What worked to find product market fit? How'd you scale? And I'm like, all the things I'm telling you, I can tell you with 100% certainty will not work for you, because it was a different moment in time. It's a different business. The competitive landscape is very different. D2C is incredibly crowded today. incredibly crowded, not just in any one vertical, but across verticals. And so, yeah, you got to be really smart and try and test and find those opportunities. And it's different for each business. It's too hard for me to answer that question.
I'd also say fail quickly, right? I think we'd all agree on that. The big mistake we see people make is they stick with it too long, especially if you're trying new things. If it's not going to work, get out of it. Like take your losses. Don't push the position and go try the next thing.
Like, how soon do you know it's not going to work?
Once again, I think that's one of the skills of being a good entrepreneur, is that you just have that sense that I pushed this one long enough and it just doesn't feel like it's working. You look at the metrics, you evaluate the numbers, of course, and you make that call.
Well, I don't know if we still have time, but that's a very, very tricky one. I personally launched a brand about 10 months, 11 months ago. So we thought like we would be hitting like at the right moment in the pandemic. And it took, just in capital, like from the founders, it took about $350,000 in initial investments to get to like that CAC LTV where we know now we can pour gas on the fire. But it took 10 months and 300 grand. So it's just like, yeah, so that first 25K, it's all in product. It's just like, how do I nail this brand? How do like I make sure that like the first people that I put this product in the hands to, like they're telling me genuinely that they're coming back. And we're not even thinking about yet like optimizing your funnel, because this is going to take a whole other year for you to like start optimizing email campaigns, SMS. And before you did optimize your funnel, you can't really throw the towel out yet, because as we just mentioned, it's extremely competitive. So your whole marketing approach needs to be better than the other person. Otherwise, you're not gonna hit that metric, and that takes time. Yeah, don't give up too fast, but don't at the same time overstretch yourself beyond capacity. But the first 25 grand, it's all product and brand. It's just like, how can you make sure that this packaging, this product is really resonating with who you think is going to buy, and that person will tell you they're coming back. And then once you have that, go find a little bit more to build your funnel and start driving meaningful traffic.
Yeah, there's a saying in the investment business that being early is like just the same thing as being wrong. So that and that's one that, if you really think about that, that's what makes it so hard to do what we do, because you could have the right idea, your timing's off, and figuring that out is a tough one, because it feels like a really good idea, and then when you see someone do it 5 years later at scale,
yeah,
tough one. Seen that many times.
Absolutely. So I think we are it for time. Thank you all so much for being here. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I have so many story ideas, and hopefully we'll all be in touch. And thank you, and thanks for Founder Made for setting this up today.
Diana, you're amazing. Thank you for leading that whole conversation. And then also to the incredible panelists, you all were on fire. I got so many great notes. And also I love seeing the chat blow up. So thank you for being here.